Welcome to this presentation, which is about balancing activity recognition and privacy preservation with a multi-objective evolutionary algorithm. This paper was co-authored by Angelica Poli, Angela Muñoz-Anton, Susanna Spinsante, myself, and Francisco Florez-Revuelta. And this research effort is the result of an activity performed within the project PAL, which is about privacy-aware and acceptable life logging services for older adult and frail people. This is the agenda of my presentation. I will first introduce the topic and why we are interested in this kind of research activity. I will then present the materials and the methods used in our study and move to the presentation and discussion of the experimental test and results. About this section, I will discuss two main, subtopics. One, which is about the performance obtained in activity recognition, and the second one, which is about the results we obtain when looking at the privacy preservation. Finally, I will draw the conclusion of our work and also outline some future developments. So this research activity falls within the topic of life logging, which can be seen as a way of digitalizing every single aspect of a subject's life. And life logging may happen thanks to the use of a huge number of sensors, such as microphones, cameras, wearable sensors, or ambient sensors, which are able to capture data about each single activity and behavior the subject may have. So, in this sense, life logging applications may expose the subject to the risks associated with privacy violations. We must say that while there is a kind of good awareness about the potential privacy risks associated to the use of cameras and microphones, which is generally quite well recognized, on the other hand, there are other sensors such as accelerometers or gyroscopes or barometers, which are nowadays available, for example, on board smartphones, that are usually considered much less dangerous in terms of privacy implications with respect, for example, to microphones or cameras. But on the other hand, it is even possible to say that in the literature we find works which show how the acceleration data collected from wearable devices may be used to enable the leakage of personal details. For example, it is possible to characterize and identify the gender or the age of the subject just by looking at the acceleration data related to gait. On the other hand, the human activity recognition, which is also known as HAR, is one of the most relevant topics within life logging applications because it targets to automatically detect and classify but also predict the human behaviors by the analysis of motion data. So we have two kind of contrasting targets. On one hand, we want to preserve the privacy of the user, from which many data, motion and acceleration data are collected, but on the other hand, we want to exploit this data in order to perform activity recognition. Activity recognition based on the processing of acceleration data is performed according to the so-called activity recognition chain, which is shown in a quite simple way in this slide. Basically, this processing chain goes from the acquisition of the raw sensor data up to the classification of the different activities or gestures or poses performed by the subject. And this happens through a number of intermediate steps, such as the preprocessing and labeling of data, the windowing and segmentation of data, and finally the features extraction step. The availability of miniaturized inertial measurement units in many devices, such as smartphones, but also wearables, allows an adequate, comfortable, and affordable way to directly measure human body motion. And the data about the human body motion measured by the EMUs may be exploited, for example, for activity or gesture recognition. And according to the specific classification target, we can select the most important features and the best performing features, but also the best performing algorithms. Unfortunately, the features we compute based on the acceleration data may capture not only the information which is strictly needed in order to classify the activity performed by the subject, but they can also capture personal details about the subject themselves. And these details are not actually necessary in order to perform a proper activity recognition and classification. So we aim for some kind of methods which allow to perform a good activity recognition, but at the same time to preserve the privacy of the subject. As I mentioned before, personal information can be disclosed without the explicit consensus of the user, for example, just by processing gait and motion-related data collected from wearable accelerometers. So these data expose the user to a potential privacy leakage about his or her identity. It has been shown in the literature how it is possible to infer gait characteristics depending on a user's muscle growth, bone structure, height, and weight just by looking at the sensed accelerometer data. That's why motion data are considered as a quasi-identifier, as it can allow the identification and tracking of the user. But in the previous works of us, we also show how the risk of exposure of personal information exists even when we consider acceleration data which are not related to gait, but associated to different types of activities or gestures. For example, acceleration data collected from wrist-worn wearable devices. So, the aim of this study is to design a method to properly select features from the acceleration data acquired with a smart wristband while performing different types of activities and used by supervised classification algorithms so that, on one hand, the accuracy of the human action recognition, which is the utility of the data, is not affected, but at the same time, personal attributes, which are unnecessary private details in the processed data, such as gender or age, can be concealed. And in order to reach these two opposite aims, we exploit a multi-objective evolutionary algorithm, which is applied in order to find the appropriate weights for each feature. About the materials we use in our study, basically we collect a dataset of acceleration signals, which is called the PAL ADL accelerometry dataset, which is available for free usage online. And this dataset includes acceleration data time series collected with the 32 Hz sample frequency of 24 different activities performed using real objects, so in real scenarios and real environments. These activities were repeated between 3 and 5 times by 33 LTR subjects, out of which we had 19 females and 14 males from 18 to 77 years old. And the table on the right side summarizes the 24 different activities of daily living we considered, whereas on the left side you see a picture of the Empatica E4 wrist-worn device, which was used in order to collect the acceleration data time series. The device was used in the streaming mode so that during the collection of data, the device was connected via Bluetooth Low Energy to a smartphone running the proper application so that the data were immediately transferred to the Empatica cloud and available for later download from the dashboard. The acceleration data collected were subjected to a number of steps related to preprocessing. So we had a fourth order low-pass Butterworth filtering of the data with a cutoff frequency of 15 Hz in order to remove the high-frequency noise. And we also applied a third-order medium filter to remove the abnormal spikes. We extracted 62 in total time and frequency domain features, not only about each single acceleration spatial component, but also from the signal vector magnitude. And we applied a windowing with a fixed size sliding windows of 5 seconds, which means 160 samples, and a 20% overlapping between adjacent windows. This slide summarizes the 62 features we computed on the data, as I mentioned before, either in time and frequency domain. So, in a first set of experimental tests, we tested the random forest supervised learning approach to classify either the activities and the gender of the subject. As you can see from the graph on the left side, as long as the number of trees used increases, also the accuracy of the classification increases, even if a large number of trees does not necessarily cause a better recognition performance for the RF algorithm. Using 90 estimators, we got a good global accuracy, 89.59% for activity recognition and 89.37% for gender classification. We also consider the confusion matrix in order to summarize the information about the actual and predicted classes, either correctly or wrongly classified. And as you can see here, there are a few activities such as open a box, take off a shoe, take off glasses, and stand up, which are confused a little bit with other activities. And we can also see how the same learning approach, the random forest, is able to provide a good accuracy in classifying the gender of the subject. So basically, we see here how the acceleration data collected from subjects performing the activities you see on the left side is actually able also to reveal some information about the gender of the subject himself. So the used features allow not only an acceptable R accuracy, but also gender classification which raises high accuracy as well. So now we have this research question. Is it possible to transform the input features so that the accuracy of the activity recognition remains good, but at the same time, some details such as gender or, for example, age recognition accuracy decreases? And in order to answer this research question, we apply the multi-objective evolutionary algorithm to find appropriate weights for each feature. Basically, we aim to filter the signal captured by the wristband, trying to maximize the accuracy of the activity recognition and at the same time to minimize the recognition of the personal characteristics of the subjects. The multi-objective evolutionary algorithm applies an evolutionary feature weighting, so we consider an individual as a real vector where each gene represents the weight given to each feature. We apply a so-called wrapper approach, so the feature selection algorithm exists as a wrapper around the learning algorithm, so it means that in the search of a feature subset, the learning algorithm itself is used as a part of the evaluation function. We used a multi-objective optimization. Basically, the solutions we found in which the different objective components cannot be simultaneously improved represent a Pareto front. And each solution in the Pareto front represents a trade-off between the objectives. The wrapper we applied is a non-dominated sorting genetic algorithm 2, which uses an elitist principle, an explicit diversity preserving mechanism, and also emphasizes the non-dominated solutions. So basically, by using this approach, each individual in the population, which is a potential solution, is given by a real vector capital U, whose elements U sub j, where j may go from 1 to 62, represent the weight of a particular feature during the classification, because 62 is exactly the number of features we computed either in the time and frequency domain. We have two functions, fitness functions we aim to optimize. The first, F1, is the human activity recognition, which has to be maximized. The second is the absolute value of the gender recognition minus 0.5, which has to be minimized. We exploited the implementation of the NSGA2 algorithm offered by PyMu, in which the size of the population used equals 50, the new individuals created per generation is equal to 10, and the number of generations without changes in the best individual to stop the algorithm was set equal to 100. So based on this configuration of the wrapper, we obtained the results which are shown in the graph on the left side, which shows how the percent activity recognition accuracy varies correspondingly to the gender accuracy. You see the Pareto front created by the solutions to our multi-objective problem. And as you can see, we have a set of solutions, and some of them are optimizing one over the other objective and vice versa. If we look at the red point in the graph, this shows the previous results where either the gender accuracy and the accuracy were both quite high, around 90%. The green point shown here represents the solution which is closer to a perfect human activity recognition, so a value around or near to 1, but at the same time provides a random gender recognition, which means a value equal to 0.5. And the closeness of the solution is measured by means of a Euclidean distance. So the green point here corresponds to a human activity accuracy of 84.14% and a gender recognition accuracy of 64.38%. So if we look at the different behavior of the random forest in classifying gender and activity, comparing the red point and the green one, we see how the accuracy in activity recognition decreases by 5.45, while the gender classification accuracy decreases by around 25. So here you see the new confusion matrices. It's interesting to notice how about the gender recognition now most of the subjects are classified as females and just 10 of the subjects, 10 instances are correctly classified. So in conclusion, we may say that a dataset of 24 different ADLS performed in realistic conditions by 33 RT subjects was created. Acceleration signals were collected from the Empatica E4 on the wrist. We used the random forest algorithm first for both activity and gender recognition separately, and we found that some activities are highly misclassified because they are difficult to distinguish using only a single accelerometer on the wrist. But on the other hand, we also found how the user gender can be easily detected from wrist motion data, and so not only from gait. Then we applied the multi-objective evolutionary algorithm with the NSGA2 wrapper to find appropriate weights for each feature so that we could maximize accuracy in activity recognition while simultaneously minimizing the accuracy in gender recognition. And we found how this approach is able to conceal the gender of the user while the performance in activity recognition is not considerably affected. About future works, we said before that the output of the multi-objective evolutionary algorithm is not a single set of weights, but a set of solutions constituting a Pareto front. So, under some conditions, any other of the obtained solutions could be chosen. This approach could be exploited in order to implement a concealing strategy on board the sensor so that we can have a privacy by design approach according to the regulations. What we aim to do in the future is to extend this work by considering either private information, which users would like to conceal, for example, details about age, using a many-objective evolutionary algorithm, and we also would like to consider a different set of features extracted from the acceleration data, not only handcrafted features, as we have done before, but also deep features. So thanks for your attention, and any questions or comments for sure are more than welcome. Thank you.